You'd probably say the amount of innovation in the last 5 years has been better than we've done in the last 20. It's one of those classic states because you've moved physical to digital, and you move from a couple of methods of paying, cash, maybe check, maybe card, into everything. You've got real-time payments running, you've got crypto payments, you've got embedded finance, you've got just the sheer adoption of contactless. People don't even think twice about it.
Welcome to the Issuer Academy, Paymentology's podcast to innovate, scale, and provide impact. I'm your host, Merusha Naidu. If you're a fintech professional, banking leader, or an innovator in the digital payment space, you're in the right place. Here, we deep dive into the challenges and triumphs of launching next-generation card programs, from virtual cards and digital wallets to cross-border FX solutions. Let's get started. Today, we're tackling a spicy topic. Where does innovation end and fraud begin? And what happens when one starts to look a little like the other? Is fraud the villain in digital banking or its unlikely sidekick? To unpack these tensions and explore what lies ahead, we're joined today by two industry leaders who bring a unique combination of expertise across security, product, and global scale. So I'd like to introduce Paul Trueman, Executive Vice President, Security Solutions at Mastercard, and Stephen Bowe, the Chief Product Officer at Paymentology. It's a pleasure to have you both. Thank you for being here.
Great to be here.
So I thought we'd start off with a bit of an icebreaker. So, Paul, what's one surprising thing about your role that most people outside the industry wouldn't guess?
Outside the industry?
Yes.
We don't issue credit cards. Oh, I'm so sick of that one. Nobody outside understands our world, so they think that we issue credit cards and we don't. I think for the internal to the industry, people that don't know us assume that we just do payments on cards and maybe a couple of others, but they don't realize the breadth of skills and capability we bring around the biometrics, identity, cyber resilience, etc. So more on that later, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, that's one of the things that people always get confused about Mastercard, because Mastercard is now this technology powerhouse, right? And Stephen, same question to you.
Thanks, Merusha, and good to chat with you, Paul, today. I think one thing that actually always surprises me is actually today how interested people are in payments. I think traditionally payments was quite complex, quite technical, a little bit nerdy. So people who are in the industry love it, but a lot of people kind of less interested. But I think as payments have become more ubiquitous in our lives, I think there's a lot more just general interest in how things work. And I was actually in the Lake District a couple of weekends ago at my dad's birthday, and it was a bit of a family get together. And what really surprised me was just how many people were interested in the work that I do and how payments work. And they're very interested when things don't work and why they don't work. At the same time, what surprised them is the level of sophistication that now happens in payments. I think they think when they're making a card payment, it's a bit like, have you got money? And everyone's been in that position where they're in a queue and it's like, why is it taking so long? And then when you start to talk to them about the processes that happen and how many parties are involved nowadays, I think it kind of blows people's mind. And I think it's a really interesting subject to talk about.
Absolutely. And I think we used to get the question like, what is a processor? Now it's like, oh, wow, you do all of these cool, amazing things. So it's really interesting about how things have changed. And I think that's what I love about our industry, right? It's evolving, but people now can see what's under the hood. So really exciting. And then another one, what is the coolest or weirdest problem you've solved lately? Paul, to you first.
I don't think it's the coolest problem, but one of the things we were dealing with recently was the discussion about how amazingly easy it is to onboard merchants, and you can onboard them in 7 minutes. But the question we then raised was, well, how assured can you be that that is a good merchant and you're not being gamed by the criminals? And while I was doing that, I then found myself in a position where I needed to go to a merchant who was really trade only. And I thought, what does it take to get a trade only account? And what it takes is a couple of quid and get some printed out business cards that say your name and kind of have a company on it. It doesn't need to be registered, hand it in, and suddenly I'm going, because they want customers and you're not really getting a line of credit. But it is interesting that we are so desperate to have the easy to be able to get on board. We then have to live with the consequences after.
That's so true.
It's weird rather than cool.
It is weird, but I mean, so relevant to our industry right now. Everyone wants things done fast and quickly, and sometimes they overlook what's on the other side of that coin.
Correct.
Yeah. And to you, weird, crazy, cool?
I don't know if it's weird or crazy, but I am quite lucky at the moment that we're working on at Paymentology a set of problems that have constantly been a thorn in my side throughout my career. My background is largely in digital banking and running digital banks, neobanks. And I've constantly been frustrated about how hard it is to get innovation, particularly around the card, into mobile apps for customers. And one of the things that we've been working on, just even simple things like how do you show a PIN, which should be easy, but actually can be incredibly complicated because you have to do that in the right way. We're working on like a set of features we call cardholder solutions, which allows us to not only just put some of those capabilities into apps really effortlessly, and I mean, rather than months, we're talking days, even hours, but actually then start thinking about card payments in a different way that opens them up to all sorts of different use cases. And that's something that I'm really quite excited. Like, I love coming into work every day to talk to the team about how we do that.
I love that. That definitely falls under cool. So let's set the scene. The shift in the customer or customer expectations. So firstly, 5 years ago, consumers were just thrilled not to have to stand in a queue at a bank. I know I was. Now we expect payments to be invisible, instant, and secure. So here's the question. Have digital banks set the bar too high, or is it just high enough? So Paul, question to you is, what's the most striking shift in payments you've seen globally in the last 5 years, given customer expectations and how they've changed?
I think you could probably say the amount of innovation in the last 5 years has been better than we've done in the last 20. It's one of those classic states because you've moved physical to digital. And you move from a couple of methods of paying, cash, maybe check, maybe card, into everything. You've got real-time payments running. You've got crypto payments. You've got embedded finance. You've got just the sheer adoption of contactless. People don't even think twice about it. I always say to them, do you think about the fact you tap once to pay, but when you get on the underground, you tap to go in and you tap to come out? And they go, oh. And so there's a lot going on there. And that requires not only that it works seamlessly, but also that it keeps everything secure. So I think that's the biggest thing. I think one more, and that we always say it's driven by the consumer. I think it's driven by enabling the consumer with choice. I don't think the consumer understands it until we stick it in front of them. And if it's useful, they'll get it. To your point, if you can put card services to them, they'll get it. I think the other big change that's happened is the pipeline of players from the merchant through the networks and the banks and all the players in between. That's really there's a number of players now adding real value. And that's what I think Paymentology is doing. When you think about PayFacs and the ISPs and the PSPs, there's a lot of value to be had in there, and there's a lot of sharing in the total value play. And I think that's incredibly valuable. The difficulty is it works the other way too. The criminals have worked out that they can do a few things very well, and they can pass it around, and they can really obfuscate the problems or how we think about the problems.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at it, right, and especially in our industry, every single player in that ecosystem is looking at innovation.
Correct.
And so if we all add a little bit of innovation to what we do and we do it with excellence, it's really creating that seamless experience for the customer. Like, I don't even notice when I tap out of the underground now. It's just, I could be listening to a podcast and I don't even realize that I've done it. It's that seamless. But it really does go back to what are we making available to customers and that optionality. So absolutely spot on.
And a lot of that also is just to connect the ecosystem better, because we see opportunity. So it's almost like we can see everybody scattering, looking to be able to get the opportunity. Sometimes you need to bring it together and go, what does great look like? And that's what we're all aiming for, because if we can get to great, we'll deliver better performance and we'll stop the criminals.
100%. And Stephen, what's something that today's customers demand that would have sounded maybe wild a few years ago? And how is that reshaping your roadmap, especially given your background in digital banking?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, I'd just say payments for a long time, almost as long as it's been going, has been full of innovation. And it's easy to kind of overlook the changes that have been made. I remember when I was at university, I used to do my banking at the ATM, and I'd work out that I didn't have enough money when the payment wouldn't go through. I'd just run out of money. I think obviously everything has gone mobile. But one thing that happened to me recently, and I'm a bit ashamed to say this, I suppose, on a podcast talking about security, but recently I lost my wallet. And My response to that actually has surprised almost myself in the sense that I just haven't bothered replacing it. I've just gone entirely onto mobile. Well, I think a few years ago, it was obvious the move to mobile. And so if you left the house and you'd forgot your wallet, but as long as you had your mobile phone, you continue going to work and so I'll make it through the day. But I think what has kind of struck me is the fact that I misplaced my wallet and I blocked my cards, and the ones that I needed to continue using, I was able to just continue to use on my mobile wallet. And so the only thing I've had to really order is reorder my driver's license. And so that kind of expectation, it really kind of struck me that having like sort of physical cards is just no longer as important. It's actually everything has to be in mobile. And that's what we're trying to think about. The other thing I think that is really starting to change is I think card payments have been synonymous with customer pays a merchant, but actually the use cases are really starting to open up. So card-to-card payments, account-to-account payments, all sorts of different opportunities for people to transfer value. And I think that's incredibly exciting. And I think that's starting to help people think differently about what a card actually is.
Yeah. And I think to add on to that, I've moved to the UK 2.5 years ago now. Prior to this, I was based in Thailand in Asia. And I never would leave the house without cash and a card and a backup card. But moving to the UK, you really can't survive just on your mobile. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And I can totally believe when you say you don't really need a physical card living here. The question is, what happens when you go outside of the UK? That's kind of where we're seeing a little bit of friction, but I do see that changing quite a bit. Anything to add?
You can still get a coffee in Cornwall, but it's a little bit hip. So it's hit or miss. You don't want to get caught to the point where you can't pay for something. But you're right. Everything's evolving. If you think about where we were with the standard expectation of cars back in the 60s and 70s, and then somewhere in the 70s, we got told we got to wear a seatbelt. And so technology just moves on.
Yeah.
And people's adoption of technology that works for them will move on.
Absolutely.
But if it doesn't work for them, they'll just reject it. So we've got to build good technology that enables things to be better for the consumer, because that's how you get adoption.
100%. I mean, we've seen that with so many different types of payment methods. We'll probably have a whole nother podcast on that, just looking at what hasn't worked, and probably for our team, a good topic for the next one. But absolutely, I think customers really tell you what they enjoy and what works for them. And that's what we learn from and grow on the innovation side.
One thing I would say just on that situation again that just happened to me recently, I was down in Devon and I went to a local market and they didn't accept card. It was cash only. And it was kind of the first time I'd come across that for quite a bit. And there was something I actually wanted to buy there. And I had to just say, look, you know what? I'd lost my wallet, so I didn't have a card to go to the ATM.
So your excuse was you lost your wallet. It's not that you got it fully digital.
But it was absolutely a situation where I had to opt out of that transaction. So I think the importance of mobile payments is just critical nowadays.
And I think that's really interesting, because I think there's a cultural norm where people don't want to let go of some things. And I think we'll come on to that later. I quite often relate card is a bit like a pencil. I mean, we've kind of got all sorts of things, we've moved on from it. But a pencil's inherently useful.
Yes.
And it just does one thing very well. And that works. But people are then wanting to get in touch with money. We've also know about older generation who struggle with the amount of technology. Just having a phone that makes calls, but then having a phone that then digitizes, etc. They have difficulty going, well, how do I deal with this? I feel very uncomfortable, which we'll come across later on, opens the door for scammers. So I think there's always a balance required. Yeah. And that's the whole point, is you're enabling choice. The people can make the choice.
No, I entirely agree with that.
And I mean, that is a good segue into the next topic. So trust versus seamlessness. So we always say great digital experiences are like theme parks, thrilling, smooth, but over in seconds. But behind the scenes and behind all of the magic, there are seatbelts, safety checks, there are engineers managing the whole show. How do you keep the excitement alive without compromising security? And so, Stephen, can we really have it all? Lightning fast payments with airtight security, or is something always being sacrificed?
So I think we can, and I think we should expect to as customers. I think historically, there's probably been a bit of a sort of tendency to look at security and customer experience as almost mutually exclusive. And that's partly been due to the response of or security putting up barriers around things that have value, putting in friction. But actually, you can absolutely enhance security by just making that experience a lot more seamless. And a good example of that would be 3DS. Let's face it, when that first launched, that was a reason not to complete a transaction. But today, now, like a push notification to your mobile phone, accept that, it's just seamless, really easy, and has enhanced that transaction no end. So I think absolutely they shouldn't be seen as mutually exclusive, and they actually reinforce one another.
Absolutely. And I still remember when we came up with 3D Secure, it was like friction or frictionless transaction. But now 3DS customers are so used to it that biometric authentication has completely streamlined that entire process. So technically both, whether it's authenticated or unauthenticated, is now frictionless.
Yeah.
Which is incredible.
We spent time trying to work out whether you should call it intelligent friction.
Yeah.
But people want frictionless. But then I made a payment one time and it wasn't on a card. It was on something else. And it was about £1,000 and it went through and I wasn't asked anything. And that scared me. And I'm thinking, well, I wasn't asked to validate anything. And I think so there's an element of, I do expect some of it. I expect it to be relatively easy and expect me to be able to solve it. And I think that's the way we're kind of going. I think you introduced me to the topic we talk about, we're security solutions. I'm not trying to force the security of defending the entire ecosystem. I'm trying to find better solutions that means it's safer and easier. And I think I said to you earlier on, contactless would not be at its rate if it wasn't invented by the security people to bring a better experience for the consumer and improve security at the same time. So the whole thing does go hand in hand, but you've got to think smartly about it. You can't see it as a bad versus a good.
I fully agree. I think good security always has the customer at the center of how it's developed and how it's created. And we can see that based on customer adoption, right? Customers, they like that level of security, but they also want it to be seamless. I also get a bit nervous when I'm not asked for any authentication.
And I think, like we've talked second factor authentication, but it's multi-factor authentication. It's third, fourth, fifth factor authentication. Because whilst we have scenarios that we have to make payments that are quite unique, actually, often we're creatures of habit. And the number of transactions that you do, there's so much repetition in there. And they bring all sorts of data points that we just know actually is definitely.
You tend to shop in the same place. You tend to shop at the same time. You tend to buy similar things.
Correct.
You're using the device, the way you hold the device, the way you type on the device. It all works through accelerometers. It all feeds data back. If we use that data, we don't have to ask you to prove anything anymore. I don't need to put up a picture and say, can you find the 5 buses in these 9 pictures? I can pretty much work out it's you without asking that question. And that's where the intelligent security systems come into play.
And that's where, almost like to the very first question, when you start to talk to people around that, it does blow their mind, but it gives them an enormous level of reassurance that that's what companies such as Mastercard, such as Paymentology spend an incredible amount of time thinking about to make sure that those payments can be reliable and secure.
I think we're very lucky because we actually have access to that data, which we didn't have before. So we're able to actually use that data to create rules around customer behavior. Where do they spend? What are their spend patterns like? What deviates? So I think that's just really exciting. And I think when you look at it, and data is also enhancing things like AI and biometric spend. So Paul, let's talk AI and biometrics. Are they really making us safer or just making the fraudsters work harder?
I think all technology is a double-edged sword. You know, Brad Smith said tools and weapons.
Yeah.
You know, a broom sweeps the floor, but if you pick up and hit someone on the head, it hurts. Yeah. So if a tool provides capability, we've got to be very careful how we do it. So a lot of the time, the question I always ask in my team is, what are the unintended consequences of a decision we're about to make with this technology? Now, I don't think that question is asked enough by non-security people across every business. If they asked it more regularly, it was an MIT professor told me it. And I think it's so useful because it makes you look at, well, what could go wrong if we make this decision? Because we think about the shiny potential. We don't think about what goes wrong when it goes wrong. I think criminals have just woken up to the opportunity. If we think back to like a bank heist, like the Italian job, you have to spend months planning it and getting a team together and getting all the skills and building the cardboard models and running the thing. And then one day you wake up and you go down in the minis and you run around and you collect the money and you hope to get away with it. And it's highly risky. And then you've got to go hide out for the rest of your life in Brazil and places because they know who you are. But the criminals today don't look for the big bang. They look to be able to do 100 people every day. and it's repeatability and it's anonymity and it's using the technology in a way that we wanted technology to do. Make it seamless, make it quick, make it easy. So they're just using the technology for their benefits rather than ours. So I think we're going to think about that. The one thing I would before, and luckily it's an industry podcast, so they won't be panicking, but understand we are ahead and we're staying ahead. We've been investing in AI on the Mastercard side for 20 years. First major AI company on Brighterion. And that, because it's all about pattern recognition when you have the numbers. There's no one sitting tallying up, should I give this transaction or go, it's patterns. And patterns lend themselves to AI. So we use that capability across before, during, and after the transaction to kind of enhance the capabilities. I think the one question we've got to be a little conscious of, I think people have misconstrued around some of the regulation that we shouldn't be looking at certain parts of data. And I think because people are quite right, data should be used, which I give it consent to be used for. But I think people are less objection if data is being used to keep them safe. And I think we've got to be clear when and how we're using that data to be able to do that. And we're very driven by making sure that's a critical part of the conversation going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I think about, do I accept? Yes, I will always accept all of the security requirements when sharing my data. But marketing, hell no. So I think customers are now, again, more educated around if it is for my security and if it helps me to maintain a seamless way of doing things, I'll agree.
If you think about that on websites today, when we brought, and this is where regulation and legislation needs to work hand in glove. If you go to America today, you go on a website, it's easy. You go on a website in UK, what happens? Something pops up and it says, do you want to manage the cookies or do you want to accept all cookies? So what's easy? We just click the old button. I do it all the time. You do it. Don't deny it. We all click the button and we go. So we don't know what we've consented to because we didn't spend the time reading who the 30 companies. I still think, and this is personal, but I think there's going to be a kind of change there where we get smart about it and we say these cookies are really about the marketing data and how we help improve the experience. These data about how we keep you safe. And I think there's going to be that because then it will get security into people's mind because they're worried about things. And I think we need to take the worry away because it's up to us in the industry to sort that.
I think it's also a little bit easy to forget where we've been and the progress we've made. So if you think about, we used to sign for a transaction. I mean, really, like, find Sergio Aguero or whoever it might be. Like, there's no real authentication behind that. So actually, I'm a lot more comfortable the fact that we're using things like biometrics, how you use them, and the importance of continuing to evolve how they're used and the different vectors. So it's not just kind of voice or facial or fingerprints, it's the combination as well as other data points that actually really enhance security and make it much more difficult for fraudsters.
Yeah. I think, again, absolutely spot on, because when you look at it, it's really about the combination of factors and all of the additional data I'm giving you as a customer to say, please authenticate me. Please make sure that this is a safe transaction. Customers are open to that type of assistance, I would say.
Yeah. I think we've still got to remember the one thing, though. No one wakes up in the morning wanting to pay for anything. Payment is something we have to do to be able to get what we want. And I think that's fair. And I think as long as we keep that in mind, that although we will probably geek out around how to do it, our point has always got to be to make this almost as seamless or invisible as possible while making sure that everything is working behind the scenes. It's I used to quite often describe it as what it would be like the experience walking around inside Disneyland. I shouldn't have any concerns. I should just be enjoying the experience. Although enjoying payment, again, is not what people are out to do.
Fully agree. Thinking about enjoying payments and maybe taking another look at it. So how do you build real trust with a consumer or a customer these days? The relationship right now with the bank starts with a 60-second onboarding process. So how are we building trust in such a small period of time that we're spending with the customer up front? I think, Stephen, to you first, being in the digital banking space.
I mean, I do think actually those 60-second onboarding processes, actually, they've got so many data points associated with them, and they're actually building trust right from the beginning of a relationship. Actually, the reality is when you open a new account, there isn't actually much fraud risk because there's no money in it. It's always about once the money gets introduced and then the ongoing authentication that we have to be really cognizant of. And I think bringing data points to that ongoing authentication is where it's really key. That's how you build trust. And that builds over time.
100%. I think, Paul, to you, Mastercard doing a lot to enhance that authentication experience with customers, right? Around how do you build trust? How do you help your issuers build trust? Where are you seeing instances like that with your issuers?
So you go back to standards, you go back to EMV, you go back to 3DS, and you take it from there. You look at what we're doing regarding biometrics. You look how we modified when we realized some of the earlier kind of concerns over contactless, how we revised the standard and then made it available for everybody. So this is a team game and everybody's part of the team because we all benefit by enabling trust across all flows when things are working. But commerce is like a motorway. You kind of want everything flowing, fast, moving along. You can accept they've got limited distances because you accept that everybody's probably doing 50, 60, 70. What you don't want to do is come across someone on a tricycle riding down the inside lane doing 5, because then mayhem breaks out and once people start braking. So the whole point is commerce works best when it's in full flow, when it's scalable and everything's working. And we need to make sure the environment is set like a motorway. It's not an A road or a B road, it's a motorway. We've got to set the signs up, get people to play nicely and do the right thing. I think that's a critical part of it. I think you're absolutely right, is there's less in the onboarding stage. It's not in the provisioning, it's more in the ongoing. Although I'd say that some of the newer merchants struggle a lot with that first 24 or 48 hours when, say, a merchant code's given out and suddenly fraud's happening. But criminals send signals. When they know that they're likely to be doing something, they're going to get away with it, they tend to tell a lot of people. And I don't know whether that's just their nature or they decide that the safety in numbers. If you speed down a road versus if you've convinced everybody to speed down the road, it's unlikely you're going to get caught.
Who do I chase?
They tell a lot of people and they use forums and they pass this information. And I think that's where we've all got to get smart. I think I was saying to you earlier on, kind of going back to, and it's an old story now, but it's great to go back and listen to Jonathan Cox talk about Darkwire and about what happened there when really the FBI went on the front foot and said, you know what, we've got a chance to do something quite unique, quite innovative to be able to crack these. And that's really getting in behind encryption. And so I think the criminal doesn't need to follow the rules. We can set protocols and guidelines. They don't need to follow them. Our job is to work out when and where we're going to be defensive and where we're going to be slightly more proactive.
Agreed. I think that proactive stance is so important with basically how we do everything these days. And we've always taken a very defensive approach. But what we're seeing is being on the offensive is really the way we're going to tackle fraud. And that kind of leads me into the next topic. So fraud in 2025 is more personal and less predictable. So forget phishing emails riddled with typos, or right now we're in the age of hyper-personalized scams, deepfake distress calls, AI bank robbers. So when you look at it, the landscape of fraud has changed significantly. So Paul, what kind of fraud keeps you up at night? Because I think about this all the time.
Scams is the only word that's on everybody's list at the moment, probably because scams have existed since Victorian times. There were romance scams, probably before actually, but they've always existed, but they've taken on a new, darker light. We always used to laugh about the typos and the requests from princes to be able to get them free some funds and be able to get them out of the country. But scams have become a really big business, and that's taken a lot of money. And I think I was looking at the Global Anti-Scams Alliance, were saying that it's worth just over $1 trillion last year, and it is on the rise. And there's some really interesting things going on there. So you look at things like APPs, automated push payment fraud, that requires the victim or the card holder or whatever to be actually convinced that they're sending the money to a good person. So that's about making sure that in both sides of any arrangement, you need to have trust on both sides. And if we know someone is setting out to take that money and you're willingly buying a car, you're giving them the money, it's really difficult. So stepping in there, and that was a classic case where Mastercard, because of our connections in the UK with Vocalink, where we look after about 90% of the traffic that go on real-time payments, we're able to go, look, the way to solve this is to get people to collaborate. And so therefore, getting the banks to collaborate, it's not a case of total share, it's a case of understanding how your data can help understand where the flow goes, and we can start to stop this. And if even the PSR said, we've not even had a full year of data with consumer fraud risk, but already we've seen a 12% decline. And we've got to keep pushing that on, greater adoption. So I think that's how scams is the one that gets me every time. And I would say the lesson out of that is working better together. And then if you go back to the earlier one when you talked about the pipeline, I said that's why I think we're doing what we're doing with you at the moment on Paymentology, is this sheer ability to go, what are the problems out there? What do we have in our toolkit that can help you? What can you take, use, modify, and get into market that we can really raise all the boats in the harbor? My principle is make sure everybody's security is improved so that flows better and commerce works better.
And I think obviously working with Mastercard so closely on the product side, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, okay, how do we create a really great customer experience, bundle in the right fraud solutions for customers, and then make it accessible to everybody? That way, like you said, we're all going down the same highway. We have the same tools. We're able to fight off those tricycles and really get moving. So I think
that's stuck in your brain now, isn't it? You'll never see a tricycle on the motorway.
Never see it again. Well, it depends on where we go, but yes. But it's so important to collaborate and to learn from each other and make sure that as partners, we are constantly pushing and driving each other to do better and be better. So this partnership is one of ours that we hold so dear because you're really helping us to give us the tools to help our customers combat all of those different types of scams and frauds and that kind of thing. Stephen, I'm going to let you weigh in here because I know that you have a lot to say about APP fraud.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot, like the data points are going to be key, but it's not just kind of the authentication because these payments are authenticated. It's people being duped to send money to nefarious actors. And it's like, so how do we go beyond confirmation of payee and things like that to really give a lot more certainty about who you're sending money to and allowing people to feel a lot more informed? I think you kind of just talked about it, where you sort of, the absence of any sort of insight around a transaction actually makes you feel more vulnerable. So I think things like that can actually make people feel more secure, more reassured by bringing some of those data points into the process. I think one of the things, though, for me is that we also do need a step change in the way we're thinking about security, because it's still a little bit of a kind of walled garden, more challenges type approach. And I think, look, as long as there's things we value, people will try and steal them. And so the actual best way to combat some of these fraud initiatives is to actually remove the value from a transaction. So we can use things like one-time use cards with all sorts of different data points on that if for any reason they're intercepted, they are useless to the end perpetrator. And so things like that can allow sort of customers to be a lot more reassured. And so it's almost every single transaction can be its own card, its own token. And that's why tokenization is so important. And that's why we invest a lot in that Paymentology.
Yeah. And I think the two of you were talking about that earlier, right?
We were, yeah.
Evolution of tokenization and how it's really helping to combat fraud. Paul, anything to add to that? Because I didn't.
No, I think tokenization is a critical part of how you play in the digital world. It gives identification to where sources and place. Tokenization itself is a critical part, but it still needs the other wrappers of security around it, whether it's in the provisioning in the first place or it's ensuring. I'll say when you think about a device, people always say a device is a good device or a bad device. Quite often a good device can become a bad device in the hands of the wrong person. Invariably, a bad device never becomes good again. It just never goes that way. So I think to your point is there's a lot of patterns, there's a lot of data we can use. And I think combining that data to drive intelligence to make better decisions means you don't have to ask the consumer as many times. To your point earlier on is it's not a case of let's make it really difficult and then no one will break it. It absolutely can't be that. It's a case of we have the capability to drive data to gain intelligence to make better calls, to help everybody be safer. And that's what we're all after.
Yeah. And Stephen, when we talk about tokenization, I know that you and your team are doing a lot to kind of evolve the way we do tokenization, looking at single-use cards, tokenizing every single card. How are you seeing that filter down into the customer journey and create a really seamless journey for customers?
Yeah, I mean, look, some of those one-time use cards. So web provisioning now allows us to send not just cards to our own wallets, but to other parties' wallets. So now we have a better understanding of who the recipient is on the other side. So we're now more certain of that. And we can then put all sorts of controls around that. So if I want to send money to my kids, I could give them a card, a one-time use card that can only be used they can't use it to buy alcohol, or they can't use it to go gambling, or they can only use it to buy food or something like that.
In-app games.
All these different things. And it gives a lot more certainty about how payments are being used.
Great point. I think when we look at, and I want to come back to the point on AI, because I think, is AI a superpower or an arms race? So AI is helping us onboard customers in seconds and predict what we'll buy next, but it's also the new weapon of choice for fraudsters. So here's the question. Are we upgrading our armor, or are we handing over the keys to these fraudsters/scammers? So here's the big question. Let's settle it. Who's using AI better right now? Is it the good guys or is it the scammers?
We're using it well.
Okay.
Yeah, because it isn't our first rodeo. We've been doing it for years. Most of the banks, most people that you need to handle a lot of data have been using AI for a long time. And let's not get confused between Gen AI and AI. AI's capability is about patterns and pattern management, and it does that incredibly well at scale. I think what you're seeing now is a bit like when you talk about startups are growing at 200%. Yeah, they are, but they're also very small. But the trouble with the criminals is there's a lot more of them now, and they're all encouraging others. So therefore, you're seeing this rise where they're seeing easy money. And scams are there. The second one, if I get to sleep again after scams, it's probably ransomware that worries me, because again, they're not going after the big targets. They're not going after a big bank. They're going after communities. And they could take a lot of communities and it's never going to register on media anywhere. And so there's a lot of money can go quite easily with people not spotting it. So I think that they're good, but they're not cracking the code. I think if you listen to people like Jeff White and the work he did around Lazarus heist, really interesting, some of the technology there, or even what he's done on his money laundering in a recent book. I think some really interesting stuff, and they're quite innovative, because all they've got to do all day, they haven't got to worry about shareholders, they haven't got to worry about KPIs, all they've got to do is work out to get to the money, and they could sit and ponder it for weeks, and I could tell great stories at a party about how they are doing interesting things, but we're seeing it and we're stopping it. The question is going to be it's not going to stop. They're not going to go away and find another career.
And Stephen, to you, who do you think is doing it better?
So I think fraudsters, this is giving them a new set of tools, but ultimately it also, the way payments are happening, we have more data points to be able to actually leverage AI. So I think it gives us a lot of different defense mechanisms. I think Paul's point, though, is they're not going after the most bleeding edge, security conscious, large scale organizations necessarily. They're going after sort of the weakest links. And so actually what we have to do is bring technology, democratize technology, make it easier to use for the people who maybe are more uncomfortable with it. And actually then we can give them the same level of sort of control, convenience and security.
Yeah, I think the more we close the gaps at every single level, that's how we beat them. Because you're right, the larger businesses who are really conscious of security, they have the protocols in place. It's the customer who says, oh, I've lost my card, but it's okay. I'll wait a couple of hours till I get home to stop it. That's the kind of customer that we need to protect, right?
And that's why you hear us talk about securing the transaction. That's just like every day. The next part is enabling the interactions. It's about provisioning, it's onboarding, it's all of the things, it's identity. And the final piece is about empowering connections. It's driving the ecosystem to be better. Because every time we're better, we close a door. And so what's going on around APP fraud, how we're all collaborating, how we're working through what's the problem, how do you solve it, it's going to make it more and more difficult for them. And I think that's how we'll go. I think the final part of that one, I always link that to what we talk about connected intelligence, is all before, during, and after the transaction, all the elements. Even if it goes right, then something might not go right. They don't like the product. It didn't arrive. It got put in next door. So then you have to go through settlement and disputes. But the other part is cyber. And I think that's an important part. Again, that's where people don't think about us. But when we just bought Recorded Future recently, but we've been working on that for a long time now. And we can give you analysis of your cyber resilience. I can do it in literally 2 minutes. I can pick any company and I can analyze them. Why? The way I tell that story, I said, if I'm going to buy a pair of trainers, they're never going to be totally stylish, let's be honest. And I know which ones they are, and I know where they are in the shop, and they're just near the door, and just next to them is a till. I literally have to walk in. I'll be out in 15 seconds, but around the corner, and that shop's the smoke coming out the front of it. Am I going in? No, of course I'm not going in. That would be stupid. And yet we do that with online website. We look at websites and think, well, the price is really low and it's going to sell in 20 minutes. I've got to buy it. The smoke's coming out the door, people. So just think about it. We treat things differently in an online world to a real world. And we need to make sure that every merchant, every acquirer, every player in the ecosystem is as good as it can be, because the failure of one undoubtedly leads to the failure of others farther down the line, because the system rolls through. So we're trying to improve everybody's bench strength.
And I think we all have a responsibility. Every single party in the ecosystem, we have to play our part, work together, and make sure that we are doing what we can to protect as much of that value chain as possible.
Correct.
Yeah. Stephen, what's the coolest way you used AI to make things smarter, faster, or just plain better?
It's not actually a particularly remarkable use, but one thing I was just doing with the team recently, we've been looking at how we create our sort of product discovery documents. And I think a lot of people, when they're thinking about product, it's all about the idea. I've just got this killer idea. And of course the idea is right. The reality is in product is that you've hopefully got a nugget of a good idea, and you've got to kind of bring the value through, find out what you don't understand, where your assumptions are misplaced. You've got to try and learn faster than anything else. The ability of kind of ChatGPT for you to test your ideas, get different reference points as you develop a product, it's just remarkable. And we're kind of shrinking what took 3-4 months and into like literally hours and less. So I think what that allows us to do is to be a lot more focused on the actual understanding the customer requirements, the customer problems. And so it's not particularly sexy, but that is something that's literally happened to me this week. And I was quite really impressed by it.
I think for us in payments is very cool. I mean, the fact that you can validate the theory, see if that idea is actually going to stem into a good customer experience is fantastic. I mean, Paul, what do you think? I think it's great.
I think it's amazing. I think it provides so much capability, but like everything, we'll focus on what's great and we've got to keep our eye. Remember what I said earlier on about unintended consequences? So I think, and I feel like I'm either being a negative or a boomer. I don't know what, but it's that kind of recognition. And I've been using a number of them to understand, but also explain to people where hallucinations come. And I think what's really done, especially on chat, the ability to take all of that data and get it analyzed and get a summary is great. But if I then make sure that everybody just summarizes everything, then no one reads anything. So then I get concerned that we're missing the opportunity that someone, but then who wrote it? So there's a whole kind of conversation. What I thought was really interesting about hallucinations, which is, you know what hallucination is, where ChatGPT or a generative AI system is designed to take 2 points that you're given it and try and connect it. And it will connect it with data where the data's there, and where it can't connect it, it'll just tell you a good story. And so I did one recently where I was talking to a bunch of customers, and I said, look, I just want to explain how hallucination works. I said, because we all know the story of the family that used the sat-nav, followed the sat-nav and drove off the end of a pier because it showed the road was going to the island. And they said, well, no one told us. Well, generative AI can do it, but so much smarter. And so I basically said, please give me a letter that invites the most intrepid mountaineers across the world to come visit us in England, where we're going to climb the highest and most arduous peaks in Norfolk. Now, if you know Norfolk, the highest point is 109 meters above sea level, and there's slight inclines. But it was really interesting. And the more I asked it to
Elaborate
better,
yeah,
the more it made things up to make them sound fantastic. And at the end, I started to believe there's mountains in Norfolk. Yeah. So we just need to be careful that technology used for the right purpose has amazing power, and AI is undoubtedly that. But you can easily fall for the let's use it for something simple and then trip up. And we just need to be careful that people are using it correctly.
100% agree. I think it's all about balance and making sure that you are getting the information, but again, being rational with what you're reading or seeing. I will tell you a funny story. One of our product directors, I was asking him a question. I was like, oh, have you seen this dispute reason code? And he was like, oh, I'll show you something really cool. He had put in the Mastercard chargeback guide into generative AI. And he was like, oh, here's a summary. And I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like, now we can tell customers, instead of reading a 3,000 pages, not 3,000 pages, but reading a linear manual, oh, here's a reason code. Here's what it's for. This is when you use it. And I think it really made customers see the art of the possible around, I no longer need to be confused about the complexity of payments. It can be simplified. And that was brilliant.
So it's an enabler. And
Exactly.
tools, if nothing else, should be enablers.
Yes.
And I think that's a great use of it.
Yeah. And just talking about AI, how is Mastercard using AI to detect threats before they happen? Because that's really interesting, right? Like you said, proactive, offensive.
Well, if you think about what we were just talking about on APP fraud, the ability to see a potential transaction and not only to be able to see the transaction, but have a look at the person who's making it and the person receiving it, because we're kind of assuming it's the person who's asking for it, but it could be the other way too. And just go, what are their patterns of behavior? What do they normally do? And what do they do subsequently? If I go to an account and that account has regularly changed its name, or I go to that account and it's equally transaction between real-time payments, but also cryptocurrency accounts, I might start asking questions, is that what I would accept as a normal behavior? But I could also look at who that account works with. And then quickly I can start to identify other accounts further down the line that have been seen in other events. I'm going to do a story, and it's definitely going to go, you'll cut it, which is the whole story of my aunt's never been involved in an accident, but she's seen thousands. Because you kind of have to be in that environment around that point. And I think that's where I think we're going to see, there's a lot of areas where AI is used at the front end tools, and it's basically just giving us more tools, more capability, more power, and more insight to be able to make better calls. And to your point is, I think the data quite often is there. It's A, difficult to access, and B, it's difficult in that real-time basis to be able to make calls on it. The smarter we get around data, data drives intelligence, intelligence drives insight, insight drives better behavior.
I think it absolutely doesn't relieve us of our kind of obligations to be skeptical, to be challenging, to kind of be not just accept what we're given, but I think it gives you so many different reference points that actually can open your eyes to new possibilities.
Yeah, it's like balancing gut feeling with data and making sure that you're rational with how you're thinking through things. And again, it's all about balance. You could have the information, but it's for you to decipher how much of that am I going to take and use, and how much of that actually is irrelevant and we should be disregarding. And Paul, to your point, when we look at how Mastercard is using AI, one of the things I think that is so cool is decision intelligence, because what you're able to do is in real time analyze the data that you're seeing based on all of the millions and billions of Mastercard transactions and actually provide a score that says, here is a single data point that is going to help you decide, do I approve, do I soft decline, do I decline? And I mean, just that bit of technology and innovation is changing the way we approve transactions. Like at a basic level, within 4 seconds, we're able to say yes, no, soft decline. It's amazing.
Yeah, we better be quicker than 4 seconds, that's for sure. Yeah, well, decision intelligence was the first of the big born projects that came out of our AI acquisition, which was Brighterion, back in 2015, 16. And it is phenomenal because you're right, it provides you a score between 999. And what it's doing is it's giving you a fairly good confidence score, but it doesn't tell you yes or no. It gives the score to the banks, and then the banks or whoever's dealing with it, it's their appetite for what they do with it. If you can deliver that in milliseconds, you can make a massive difference. If you then take that data, for example, and you go, okay, I can make better decisions all the time. I can ask the merchant to feed in more information that can make it even better. You start to see all this advantage. That's where you're seeing DI Pro coming up and some of the newer innovations which are using Gen AI. But you also see the ability to pull out from that individual transaction, because there's last year 159 billion transactions over the Mastercard network. That's just the payment transactions. You can almost double that if you add in all of the identity calls and everything else that's going on. So you can see 1 billion touch points, but 159 billion transactions. If you could then pull out from that data and look at it from 50,000 feet, you can then see very different patterns. So you can see momentum and attacks, etc., which we deal with all the time through a product called Safety Net. So we're looking for momentum coming in from hotspots coming in from different parts of the world. That's phenomenally powerful.
Yeah. And it's all about that multi-layered approach to how you're tackling each transaction, which is just incredible. So here is another question. Security as a product feature, because it's always so difficult to sell something that is not always as sexy or as cool as the other innovation. So cybersecurity is like electricity. We don't notice it when it's working, but the second it goes out, everything is halted. So how do we make people care while the lights are on? So Paul, to you, how do you turn cybersecurity into a value add? Not just a background process, but something customers actually feel and appreciate.
It isn't a single cybersecurity then isn't a single term. I can't offer you cybersecurity. Or if I did, it might seem to you like insurance and you go, well, can I get away without using it? Because that seems like money spent that I might not get back. But if you say to them, would you like to have better control over, say, your receipts? Would you like to have better understanding of where your subscriptions go? Would you like to have better understanding that the people you're working with have been validated or doing the right thing? Would you like to know that you're not going to walk into that? You're not going to tap into a site that we don't think is good or has got some concerns because of their validation, etc. You want to help them do that. But the other one you want to do is you want to reach all those people who are trying to get that consumer and say, you need to be on your game. You need to be ready because you're right. You don't want the smoke coming out of the front of your shop. You don't want to have an invalid certificate. I was trying to do one the other day. I won't say which government, but it's to do with my holiday. And trying to get onto their site. And it didn't matter. I came in through Chrome. I tried Firefox. I tried Safari. I couldn't get on because every one of them said they don't have a valid certificate. This was a major government, but I couldn't get on because they hadn't revalidated the certificate. So it makes me, well, wait a minute. And I'm thinking, am I looking at the right site? Have I gone in through maybe I'm being scammed. So probably because I spend much time thinking about it, but it wasn't. They just hadn't done it. And these other pieces were coming in. Cybersecurity, I don't think people want to buy cybersecurity. They don't want to have to think about it. They want trust. I do think with things like APP, there's always a question of you should be asking yourself, do I know this merchant like that? Do I know this person like that? Wait a minute. Do I absolutely know that this is for real? So when in the old days you went into a shop and you bought something and it went wrong, you know where to take it back. But if something happens online, it's very difficult. And so people are assuming that someone somewhere is sorting it. And let's hope we are. But it can't always be true. People actually do need to look after a few things themselves as well. So I'm always asking them to do a bit better. But I don't think cybersecurity, I think they get worried about being scammed. I think they get worried about a number of other things that could happen to them. I don't think cybersecurity is a term that they hear it, but they don't associate with them.
Yeah. And you're so right. I do it sometimes. I'm just like, oh, I'm sure the site is okay. Somebody is taking care of it, which it really shouldn't be the case. As a customer, I should trust that I know where I'm spending or who I'm sending money to. We have to take responsibility for the payments that we're making. Stephen, do people care about security? When it breaks, how do you make it a part of what they love and the experience and the product, not just a feature that keeps them safe? How do I make them care?
So I think everyone cares when it doesn't work. It's quite obvious. I think to a certain extent, people may be seen as a little bit careless. I've just lost my wallet. It's not exactly. And so it's kind of where people get frustrated is though when something doesn't work or when the friction is too much. I think then, okay, this is ridiculous. I can't live my life. I can't make the payments that I need to make. And I'm frustrated. And that's when they start to try and sidestep processes and when they kind of will make missteps themselves. So I think though part of it is around reassurance and being proactive, just being able to let people know some of the sophistication that is happening, just being able to put little prompts. We've got you back. Don't worry. There's simple things like this was the last time that you logged in. Like this was push notifications around a transaction. So you just feel informed, you know things that are going to go right. And then when something does go wrong, being able to make that effortless to fix, which I still think there is a long way to go in terms of just being able to put people back in the position they need to be with a lot less effort. I actually, when I first moved back to the UK, I was actually sat on the sofa with my wife and a transaction came through and we noticed it. And I was like, are you shopping for something like for a new dress, I think it was? And she was like, no, that wasn't me. And we quickly realized it was a fraudulent transaction. And we kind of disputed it in the app. And I always remember it's like one of the most profound experiences I've had. It's like within half an hour, I had the money back in my account. And so that was like a really remarkable experience. It's something that I do tell people about. And so I absolutely think by kind of putting that level of craft, a level of thought around fixing things when they do go wrong, actually can be really powerful for customers.
Absolutely. And I think that builds complete trust. If you're getting your money back in 30 minutes, like you said, you know that your bank has your back and they're looking out for you.
And the reason they were able to do that in 30 minutes is because I identified it as a problem so quickly. So it's that proactive nature that actually enabled that. If I hadn't realized that till days later, then that becomes a lot more problematic.
And I think that's key, right? It's collaboration between the customer and the bank to say, I've identified a problem, I need your help. So it's all about working together to say, okay, how do we resolve this? And that's such an important point because I think sometimes consumers take a step out and say, I didn't do it, so it's not my problem. But in actual fact, a customer can really help the entire process if they are just proactive. So it requires, like we said, every single person / company in the value chain, including the consumer, they're a part of it, which I think is so important. And I love what you said about having your back as well, because I think the other thing is customers want to see their issuers there for them in good times and bad. And if you set that behavior of constant communication, that's also a good sign of we're doing things right, but we'll also be there if something goes wrong.
I mean, is there a better time if you're going to build trust and relationships with your customers that they just assume things will go right? I mean, we talk about 5 nines in our business, as in 99.9999. And you think, wow, because you're right. When it goes down, we're in the front of the newspapers. No one wants that. So we spend an immense amount of time and effort and money trying to make sure everything works. But what happens when it doesn't? It's how you react. It's how you turn up. That's what's critically important. That's why in Mastercard, you'll hear us talk about zero liability. We have a zero liability rule, which is if it's done right, it's sorted. We've got your back. And I think that's really important because that's all that consumers ever want to do. And if you lose the trust over that one transaction, then you won't get them the next time. That card will move to the back of wallet. No one wants that.
Absolutely.
So that's the principle is you've got to stay up and you've got to be in it. The one thing you'll put in another episode, I'm sure, is start talking about what's happening with first party and third party fraud, because that's on the rise again, because people are saying, well, they'll never know, or Jeff Bezos, he makes billions, he won't spot. We're seeing that change, that cultural change, and that we know we can solve too. But we need to be on that game too. People can't get away because that, when a minority do, impacts everybody. It's just a different form of digital shoplifting.
It is.
That's, people won't like that term, but to call it first party or friendly fraud is what we used to call it. It's not friendly fraud. It's fraud.
And I think you're right. Let's just call it what it is, right? It is fraud.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're nearing the end. So looking at the future of the card used to be the star of the show. But now it's just one of the many tools in a bigger payments toolkit. So Stephen, is the card still the moment for customers, or is it becoming just a pass-through?
I think it's something that Paul said right at the beginning. I actually don't think the card has ever been the moment. I actually think people make payments to get to an outcome. You're trying to buy a car, you're trying to buy a holiday, you're just trying to buy a round of drinks to celebrate with your friends. Like, we've got to remember that we're actually in a very fortunate position to actually bring great delight to people in their everyday lives. And I think how we really help people is allowing those transactions to go through as effective as possible, but celebrate how we help people make the most of their money. I think that's the key thing. It's not about us. We actually just facilitate so many payments, so many moments of delight, allow that to show through.
Oh, you mean priceless experiences? I think you do, don't you? No, I think you're right. And we see the card as being a physical entity, but the card sitting on your digital device is still a card. It's an identifier of you without giving away who you are, to be used for a purpose that connects where you're getting the goods to where the source of funding is. That's all it is. And so it will transform, whether it be on there, whether it be on your watch, whether it be on your phone. It's still the same, to my point of, and when I said earlier on, the card's like a pencil. Well, all those other things still involve you putting a mark on a piece of paper or putting a mark on an iPad or whatever it is. It's the same thing. It's just a means by which to enable commerce to happen without having to use cash.
Absolutely. And I love the way you put it, like it's just a way to enable the experience. And I fully agree with you. I don't think customers care about whether it's physical, whether it's virtual, whether it's a ring, a watch, whatever it is. It's, I want to get home on the train. How do I do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to remember, we now kind of like completely believe everything to do with us. Smartphones. Smartphones arrived in 2009. If we're measuring them by human age, they're mid-teens. They're just evolving, and it's going to evolve so much. In 10 years' time, we'll look back and think, were people still carrying mobile phones? I don't know. I think it could be. The technology's there. So we'll see. But at the end of the day, there's still going to be an identifier that enables commerce to happen. And the easier we make that, the better it's going to be.
Absolutely. So looking to the future, Paul, let's fast forward to 2030. What is one prediction you'd bet your badge on for the future of cybersecurity and payments?
Depends what the badge is. Is it my Boy Scout badge? I think the payment industry is undergoing seismic shift. There's technology innovation, there's regulatory advances, there's tectonic shifts in you've just seen some big announcements to speak of buying and selling and moving companies and issuer focus versus acquirer focus. And that's going, and then at the same time, you've got the consumer and business requiring different things. I think all of that's going to happen. So I think a lot will change. I said, all I want to remain focused on is keep an open mind as to the opportunity. If you see a headwind, work with it because it can help you resolve the problems, and keep an eye on what is the unintended consequences. Because if you do that, you'll have thought of both sides of the equation and the value will come out.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stephen, are we still swiping in 2030, or will the card as we know it vanish into the background?
I certainly think the plastic probably will be less relevant, but I actually think card payments will become even more ubiquitous. They'll be used in all sorts of different use cases. And so it won't just be kind of that sort of the traditional transaction where you go into a shop and make a payment physically. It'll be actually all sorts of different use cases for the card. And I think the card will become this sort of digital representation in our minds about how we connect a payment to a kind of source of funding, to an outcome.
Yeah. And maybe by 2030 or maybe 2040, our kids won't even look at a card. They'll just say, okay, well, I'm going to use my watch to make this payment, so who knows?
My kids looked at a card now, I'd be surprised. But to my point is, the card is, you're thinking about it being a physical, but it's a manifestation, it's digital. There is a card or equivalent, a card, a secure token on their phone that connects them to their device, to their payment. So the bond is there.
Absolutely. And lastly, what is one piece of killer advice that you would give to anyone building a digital bank right now?
So everybody has an idea to solve a problem or to close a gap. I get that. I see so many pitches. I hear so many of these things about what they can do. And a number of people that come to me saying, we can solve scams. Okay, yeah. I know we've just been sitting, not paying attention. I get it. You've got an interesting idea. My point as a network for me is, let's work on what really works. And then the question I want to answer in bold is, can you scale it? Because anybody can do things at small scale, but being able to connect it onto the network, a bit like the idea of, if I stick it on the motorway, is it going to go? Is it going to stay at speed? I need to know that. So I'm always looking for where the technology can be when we're acquiring business. Can we link that technology to a scalable, interoperable, global platform in ways that we can run at the sort of millisecond rate we're running today? If we can, then it's an interesting idea. It might work at prototype, but I've got to know I can fire the thing up. So it's like coming out of a wind tunnel and sticking it on a track, to use a recent McLaren analogy, since we're now sponsoring them. But that's, I think, the biggest question with fintech is, do more thinking, not just about the problem, but how will you get that scaled when you go talk to a partner, whoever it is.
And Stephen, you've been in this space, right? You've built a digital bank. So what would your piece of advice be?
I think there's two things for me. Whilst I think making the transactions has become simpler, more ubiquitous, actually for customers, helping them manage their money is more complicated than ever before. Like the cost of living crisis, just how hard it is to sort of achieve kind of the goals that you've set out in life or day to day, like it's very challenging. And I still don't think we're developing experiences that really help people maximize every single step of the way. I think the other thing though, we've talked a lot about AI. The one thing we haven't really talked about when it comes to AI is also changing the interface. And I think that is going to be quite a profound change in terms of how services sort of people experience their banking. And it won't be necessarily your mobile phone. It might not be even me performing the transactions. It might be my own personal GPT navigating the kind of digital ecosystem on my behalf and making sure that I can manage my money more effectively. It's bringing all those different data points and insights. So I think that is going to be quite a different banking experience, financial experience in the future.
We were looking at that recently, and the principle that today we as humans are used to going into a search engine, putting something, and then looking at the first 20 results and working out whether we found the one we want or then going and doing another search. To your point, you will have to the point where you will have personal assistants, which will understand you and say, if you want to book a flight to Paris, they're going to work out, you'll be staying in some fancy hotel and I might be staying in a travel lodge, but they'll know me and they'll know you and they'll kind of work out your agenda just for you. So you won't then have to go down the 20 things and work out what's best. It'll already have pre-selected. So you're getting served up the content you want. Now, there'll be the views going, well, wait a minute. Human beings still like to make choices. There's this question going on about cars at the moment. We built cars that got faster and better and smarter and everything else. And then we said, and you enjoy driving your car. And then we say to you, just sit back because we're going to do it for you. And people are going, wait a minute, I don't know. Do I want you driving? Sometimes I do. But sometimes I kind of like, so I think there's going to be this whole thing that we've always talked about is everything's got balance. You've got to enable choice. Human beings are inherently curious beings and want to go and try things. And I think we've got to enable that with the choice that suits their needs but keeps them safe.
Personalized optionality, basically.
There you go. You said it so much smarter than me.
No, but it's absolutely true. That's what I want. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Honestly, thank you so much to both of you for being here. And that's a wrap on this episode of the Issuer Academy. Like I said, thank you so much, Paul and Stephen. I think we've learned so much during this interaction. And thanks for bringing such sharp insights to the table. Really appreciate it.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much.
I'm just going to get your wallet that I got from you a couple of months ago.
That wraps up today's episode of the Issuer Academy, Paymentology's podcast to innovate, scale, and provide impact. I hope you're leaving with fresh insights and actionable strategies to help you revolutionize your card programs and drive true impact in the world. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, please leave a review to help us reach more pioneers like you. Also, be sure to subscribe and follow us for more inspiring episodes and behind-the-scenes content from Paymentology. Until next time, I'm Merusha Naidu. Keep innovating, keep scaling, and keep striving to make an impact.